Yo, whoa, there's so much going. All right, there we go. Yo, what up, everybody? Wait, why can I hear myself? Oh, I'm listening to the stream. That was crazy. Welcome to the CJ Show, episode 11. Today, I'm super excited for today. We've got a special guest, Jimmah and Satthew. This, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be a coach's edition, I guess you could say, by the way that we do have two coaches. And also Chrome, another coach. And also Jarzo, another ex-coach. So I'm just surrounded by absolute masterminds of the Rocket League community. And they're all going to obviously, yes, teach or coach Chrome or tell Chrome how to coach Space Station because Jimmah did that. I'm not sure Sathew's aware of that segment, but we'll get to that later. Gentlemen, welcome. Jimmah, Satthew, it's a pleasure to have you blokes on your debut for the CJ Show.
Thanks for having. Yeah, absolutely. Keen to finally be here, mate.
Oh, it's absolutely. I'm loving it. Chrome's excited. I've never heard him ask so many questions. It's like he's with your fellow comrades, Chrome, your fellow coaches. You want the knowledge.
I mean, it's kind of like when you relate with people. It's kind of like you hit it off, right?
Yeah, and
just how it is.
And Jarzo, as someone who's, do you feel like you're back with the buds as someone who was, obviously a premier coach many seasons ago?
I think it's more kind of like, how like Shaq will go on like ESPN.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it feels like. It feels like I'm not back with the buds, but I'm like, I have the new guard. The whole new guard's here. It's like I've got to see them grow. They're like, so instead of my friends, they're like the people I've seen rise.
Well, we're gonna have to start where we were about to go into because Chrome was just jumping in early. Johnny, thanks for the raid. He's got 56 ghosts just still watching his stream. We're gonna go back because Chrome was just firing off these questions before we went live about Jimmah because everyone's intrigued, Jimmah, about the current power situation. So I think we'll quickly just cover that before we really dive into some coach lore. Power right now, a couple of regionals. Just talk through us. What's going on with your split, and can you make the major?
Yeah, look, I mean, obviously it's like possible. The planets all have to align. And just to rip the Band-Aid off, because I feel like there's been no sort of PR around that. Look, we've had an absolute tragic split. For those who aren't aware, Power and KCP have found each other twice in a row in the quarters. That's basically killed our points. So in OCE, only the top two teams make it. So realistically, if you want to be making it to majors, you need to be at least making the grand final or winning it. And so I think for us to even like make a tiebreak, I'm not too sure. I've pretty much given up looking at the points. We have to like hope that KCP just throw and lose in their groups and somehow we win the whole regional. I think that's how it works, CJ. I'm not too sure if you've been glossing over the points, but I mean, we're not going to hold our breath on KCP losing because I feel like this is the first time where the groups are quite well spread. I feel like the seeding is a little bit more balanced. So it's pretty much they're going to make it out of groups, and that's it. They've just secured themselves their spot.
And
you have to come in with the entire list of things. That's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of planets right there.
Yeah, and then the other few planets that I've forgotten about too is like we need like Him Police to like, we need to knock them out in the quarters or something like that. Yeah, it's a bit messy. It just is what it is. So, I mean, but that's, at the end of the day, you got to beat the team in front of you, and we lost twice in a row in the quarters to KCP.
A little bit unlucky as well because obviously the whole seeding, you can blame the region. Like Ground Zero, a completely new team, but obviously now they're number one seed. So they came into the start of the split through qualifiers, unseeded, blew up the groups. And then I guess it's kind of like the MENA battle that everyone's watching right now. It's sort of turned into a situation about matchups and who you play when, because the format, when you've got say three good teams, well, two of them are always going to be on the same side of the bracket, or sometimes three of them, which nearly happened in OCE. Do you find yourself unlucky that you've played Power a couple of times? I know you have to beat who's in front of you. Oh, sorry, Pioneers. I know you have to beat who's in front of you, but you played the number two or one of the top three teams twice in a top 8 match. It's pretty unlucky.
Yeah, it is. And I think it's a two-edged sword because it could be an advantage too. Because let's say we came out across on top against KCP, that would have extended our lead, right? So it's like, it really is a bit of a gamble. Unfortunately, with the group system, with the seeding how it was, moving into a single elim top 8, it really does feel like it's kind of a bit of a gamble for OCE, because you are fighting for that top 2 spots, and especially in like MENA where only one team goes, right? So it is kind of like you are battling the bracket too. Obviously, you know, there's no match fixing or collusion. That just gets you eliminated. But at the end of the day, you just have to perform. You expect to win. You know, you want to beat the teams in front of you. And if it just so happens that you've come across arguably, you know, the best team or the second best team in the region in the quarterfinals twice, it just gets a bit stiff. So I recognize that it's maybe a better system where you have 5 teams traveling overseas. Like, I recognize that can work a bit better. There's a little bit more stability there, because so much is predicated on the groups and stuff in NA and EU. Whereas in OCE, it's like, you know, you're really climbing for those extra few points just to make it. And look, at the end of the day, you know, we should be beating the team in front of us. So while we can say it's a bit unlucky, if it went the other end of the spectrum, we would have been lucky, you know, because we would have extended a massive lead against KCP. And then the third regional is almost redundant, right? That's why I find NA and EU so much more exciting, because the third regional so much sits on the line. Like, take EU with G1 and EG. I've already forgotten the third.
G1 Quadrant GA, yeah.
Quadrant. Yeah. And then, and you know, and that was really exciting. It's like, oh my goodness, it's all coming down to the line, and it kind of works out. Whereas OC, it's like, you kind of missed out a little bit. That's it, GG's.
Well, I guess it's a pretty hot topic right now, the format. Obviously, MENA, it's happened as well, where technically, you know, it just happened this morning. Rule 1 probably needed to throw their group to play Falcons earlier. Satthew, you guys, for NA and EU, you guys are playing the same teams every regional, it feels like, with the format. Yeah. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, it is kind of redundant. It feels like just playing like 2 weeks in a row with the first 2 regionals. We had V1 in our group each time. And then it gets kind of boring, I guess. It'd be nice to have a little more just randomness to the groups in a way. But I can see, obviously, like, you need seeding, you need some stability, but it's kind of boring playing the exact same team. But now we got what we wish for, and we have what I consider the group of death for the last one with Rob G and Furia and Ghost.
I'm curious, how many regionals have you played V1 in this whole year so far? This season so far?
I'd have to go back and look at Wikipedia.
This is going to be our 5th regional out of 6 playing Furia.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah.
That is...
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
No, that's crazy. I mean, I'm sure you guys can't get enough of them at this point. That's a little ridiculous to me. But yeah, I mean, for the you know, regions that send you know, less than 5 teams, I almost wonder if, like, because in Asia or OCE they used to do a playoff as well, right? At the end of
we did.
Yeah, because they had 2 different regions though.
Right. No, well, with Asia, yes. Was that the same?
That's actually a great point, Satthew. Wow, why is no one talking about that? We should just have top 4 into a playoff and then
bring that back.
Ever since they switched to RLCS, they got rid of the regional playoffs, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
That makes so much sense. It gets rid of the potential, you know, playing a better team at the wrong time, stuff like that.
I will say, I feel like some people might say we talk about format too much, but I love getting so many different people's point of view on this. In the past, Satthew and Jimmah, we've talked about a lot of format stuff on the show. And something I've mentioned before is having only 2 online regionals and turning the 3rd regional into a LAN regional final, into an international major.
With the same format?
I like it. Yeah.
That sounds
similar format, and then you actually get like a full-on LAN qualification for the international major.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. I mean,
OC have done that before, though.
Right,
you remember that one, CJ, with when we had LPL, right? And the fun thing about that, and obviously it's a logistical extra hurdle to go through, but I love the idea that the better LAN team makes it to a LAN. I find that quite exciting.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I think nowadays, though, I don't know. It seems like all the online teams are also good on LAN. Like, we're rarely seeing, you know, you saw it I guess Gen G did. They end up winning their first LAN, or even the LAN rookies going to their first LAN. I feel like it used to be like, all right, it's going to take 3 or 4 LANs for this person to, get over their nerves or adjust. But nowadays, it's just these kids are coming through, playing in front of thousands of people, and they don't even care. Like, I don't get it.
Mm. Yeah, and I think that's.
Go ahead.
No, you go for it, Rob.
I just think a lot of it too is just there hasn't been LANs in a while, and then there's a LAN every 2 to 3 months,
That's
whereas back in like 2019 there's one every month. So then you can actually see the people who are visibly weak on LAN versus nowadays it's just like everyone's kind of weak. If you think about it.
Yeah, and I think for me, like regionals, because there's still a lot of pressure online, right? And so I feel like a lot of players, especially young players, become battle ready just through this open circuit, right? There's a lot of pressure riding on these players. And the cool thing about a LAN is that, yeah, like these top teams seem to be top teams on LAN, but I love that LANs always have that massive 1 or 2 upsets as well, where like a team's just like, take like a Furia, right? Like they seem to be just like diamonds, right? They're just built under pressure. And other teams, they sort of like collapse a little bit. So you kind of get that mid of the bell curve that anything can kind of happen. But then you got like, your Gen Gs that just kick goals every day of the week online. And then you just sort of see them just like come out and perform well on stage.
I think you're kind of hitting something there with like, I think we're not seeing people be bad on LAN. We're seeing people peak on LAN. Like, because Furia, before they moved to NA, were so peak on LAN focused. It seemed like. It seems like that's kind of held up with some other teams.
It's just that mystique of playing a team that is really hyped, and then you never really scrim them much. You don't really have you don't know their tendencies to the point where you're confident against them. So it's just kind of like iffy. Whereas if you play them day in and day out online, it's like eventually you're just gonna learn how to play against them. And then that's especially like those type of players never really dominated online at Sam. But once they got to land, it's like, oh my god, they're here to play.
Yeah. And CJ, you probably know this too, right? But I think if you're from a minor region, you do lean into the underdog story. It's like, hey, we're playing against a team that's, clearly prepared better. They're from a stronger region. They, you scrim them, you see they've got all these little things that just work in their favor against you, right? So you do tend to lean into the underdog story of like, all right, if we're going to win, we really have to play Rocket League to make it. And you can kind of catch off teams, I think, in that regard as well by sort of not necessarily throwing paint up against the wall, but I guess throwing the kitchen sink at it. I don't know if that's your case, CJ. If you lean into the underdog,
I think it can nearly go, I guess, the wrong way as well. It can nearly go too far, where it's like, wow, we need to, these, I guess, the minor regions, like we need to play so well to beat X team. When I think in reality, the first thing a lot of players realize when they first go internationally is, when they start screaming other teams or they're playing ranked, is like, all right, these guys aren't that much better than them, or they might be at the same level. It's just that consistency and the way they do it, consistently. It's not like, wow, everyone's hitting quadruple flip resets in NA or something when you're coming over. Like everyone's at a similar level, like mechanically, individually, and then it's just like the consistency and what they do, the mechanics and stuff like that. But I agree, like the figuring them out, however much of a meme it is for other teams, that's certainly a factor. You saw it with Falcons or Sandrock last season when they just were getting top 2 at a LAN. They were doing low 50s. No one else knew how to play this play style. Same with Furia, just the speed. But then they sort of got more accustomed, and now they're in NA and they're not as deadly right now. Satthew, I want to throw this. I don't want this to be a bad segue over to you, but obviously you played Power at the major. Was there a little bit of an unknown factor against Power that helped, or was there other factors as well?
No, I mean we had scrimmed them a couple times, so like it's not like we didn't know them, especially like Torsauce. Like the boys know him like very well, especially. I think we'd been going through some troubles in terms of just consistency, kind of like what you're talking about. Like we didn't actually have that like foundational consistency that I think is important, and I think is taking a lot more precedent in our theory now. But even last year we were like a super like cyclical team. We would go up and down quite a bit. We'd do well at LA, and then in London we'd do terrible, and then come back to Worlds, do well again. And so I think it was kind of a continuation of that. We had done good at Worlds, and so we had to do bad at the next tournament. But in reality, I think we're still figuring some stuff out. And we came out super slow against them, and Power is not a slow team by any means, and they're very creative in the air, especially Torsauce and Amphis and everyone. So yeah, they were they just caught us out, and there wasn't a mystique to it, but they came to play and just absolutely ran us over.
In terms of what I guess you guys as coaches, how you prepare for games and stuff. Look, the reason I love this show because I've got 4 coaches here, but I'm sort of so out of the loop with this stuff. One, because I've never really had, I guess, a gameplay coach in a sense. So, Jim, I've had, obviously, LBP was purely mental, and I think that did help the game a lot. Probably, I've had some, I guess, gameplay coaches, if you will, back in the day, but it was very stupid, like, if you don't play this way, we're not going to win, but it was terrible stuff, never really took anything from it. So I never really was able to fully experience a good strategic coach. Like, what I guess, because you two are similar. I know, Jimmah, you sort of started with the mental side of things, but have, I guess, worked your way into becoming more of a gameplay, play style coach. But like, what is it for you guys that, how do you prep? What's going on? Just talk. Everyone talk to me as coaches. What's going on? How do you analyze other teams? How do you prep? How do you change your style game on game?
I think, and I think Rob, you'll agree with this, but there was a big shift when league play switched over to just the open format of, back in the day, you could kind of actually watch a team pretty consistently before you played them because you know exactly when you were going to play them. And I think it was a very like counter-based meta. Like you're going to see what they're going to do, and you're going to look
Did
for
you
every
say
counter.
Rob would know? What about me, man?
Yeah, and
Hello?
Because Rob was the master at that. Rob always had a good game plan for everyone. It felt like when you played G2, it felt like they were gonna still play their same style and they were just gonna kill you. Elite, but that was from my perspective because I wasn't.
Neat way to turn it into a compliment, man. I appreciate that.
But there was that shift in season 10 and afterwards where I think you started having to kind of impose your own style pretty consistently. And so nowadays I feel like that's what scrims have become, is just consistently building in that foundation for your team and like finding some sort of consistency and figuring out, well, how do you as a team want to play this scenario? Like you look at the individual and then you look at like the general game plan or like the general idea or the general flow of how your team wants to operate basically. And you can like you game plan for teams, especially like on lands or if you like know you're about to play them the day in advance. But I feel like it's become a lot less magnified of like how much you prep for the specific team you're going to play. Rather, it's how are we going to impose ourselves and how are we going to actually make sure the game plays to how we want to play and how is it going to play our style. But maybe Rob or Jimmah or even Jaws, like maybe you guys have something else to say on that topic.
Yeah, I mean it's pretty true. Like, but especially nowadays, you pretty much have to like play the way you want to play and then make those micro adjustments depending on who you're playing. You can't really like predict like, oh, we're gonna play energy first round. All of a sudden, you don't know. You know what I mean? Like you don't prep for that moment. You just know, like, okay, we scrim this team. What works? What we played them before? What do we do? Like, all yada yada yada. It's the stuff that you constantly worked in the past, and just reiterating. You can't just like mentally prepare yourself for a lot of situations, which is kind of tough, but I mean that's how you adapt, right? In a day you pretty much played the way you want to play and then go from there.
And I think to lean in, sorry, go Jaze.
No, go ahead, guess Jimmah.
I was gonna say Rob leaned into something really good there. It's like it really is those micro adjustments that I feel make the difference. So a real example there that I find is that, you have like a sphere of influence, right? Like what are some things that you can actually change? And the reality is that, and if you're scrimming teams, you're never going to come across the same team doing the same thing every single time. Sure, there's consistency. Sure, you'll find themes that run true across the team. But like, we'll be scrimming Liquid, right? Well, like, are we going to get the Liquid that are just chasing and always on the ball? Or are we going to get the Liquid that take their time and solid? Like, they're just such a volatile and different team. And I feel like every team's sort of got, layers of how they play, right? And so for us, just to give you a concrete example, is we just got outplayed by Gen G, round one. And a lot of it came to that sphere of influence. It wasn't so much like, hey, we got G2 next. What do we got to do to beat G2? It was more so like, hey, lads, like what were the gaps in our play? And it's like we kind of identify, oh, you know, we're missing X, Y, and Z. These things are probably lacking. We're doing well here, but we could have found it here. So you kind of concentrate on yourself, and then you kind of synthesize it with what you know about G2. So we knew that, you know, for example, G2 are really good at passing, and they're really good at following touches, and they play the whole field. I'm like, all right, so we know, you know, if we creep or overcommit, you know, we get hard punished by them. So what does that kind of mean? And you know, and it really is a collaborative thing, right? So obviously, like I'm communicating with the players, but also the players are putting in their input, talking about what they've noticed, where their concerns are, and then hopefully, you know, by the time that the series begins, you've sort of landed in an area, and if it starts to work, then you know that those little micro adjustments steered you in maybe the right direction. I'm not sure if that's the same for you guys there, but that's sort of been, you know, the center of the bullseye for us, particularly you know, when it comes to international competition.
I mean, I feel like that kind of coaching is very highlighted these days. I do kind of miss the league play style. Love being able to prepare for a team over the course of a week.
Oh
Like
yeah.
I remember talking to guys back in like season 5 and season 4. Like, all right, we're going up against Rogue. We just know that the only shots they're going to put on net aren't going to be on net. They're going to be just wide of net. So just wait for them to miss, and we'll just be good. And you can't do that these days. Like you don't have enough time to actually like prepare and train the guys to actually watch out for these tendencies and these weaknesses that teams have. You just have to focus on yourself. And
So
especially with all of the international competition, you're facing so many different teams that you have to focus on yourself.
hypothetically, then, if we had like a league play, one team a week, you know, I know you said the style sort of changed, Satthew, when it went to open format. But do you think that Rocket League's like adapted past being fully able to counter strat in the manner that you used to be able to? Because it felt a bit more simple. Like teams had a bit, you know, some more simple play styles, but now it's a bit more fluid or whatever. It depends on which player's feeling it in the moment. Might be more aggressive, stuff like that. Like, could you get back to that counter strat style?
I think no. I think everyone's like evolved to the point where like every player can pretty much do what they want with the ball at like any time. Like everyone has tendencies, but it's not as pronounced as it was before. And so, like you said, yeah, there's not like we like in season 9 even with Sonics, like we would watch a team and we'd be like they play this very strict style, and it's very very mundane and it's very narrow, and we know exactly what we need to do to counter it. But that's not. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think, and like you said, like Jimmah said, everyone can have micro adjustments, and that can completely. I think those adjustments are bigger now than what they were in the past, and I think a team can accommodate for what another team is bringing much quicker. So I think it's. I don't think you can just counter strat someone necessarily.
I think as well, like nowadays, you really just got to bring your A game. You just got to play well on top of applying what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because if you're not playing well, it doesn't matter what adjustments you try to make. You're just gonna fall flat, I think.
Yeah.
Wow, Mum. So the
honestly,
3 years? Oh my god.
God.
I will say though, I do like. I mean, you haven't had to play a Satthew, but Worlds wildcard, you get a day prep for each team. It was super nice. That
You
was
can at
really
least
cool.
like you can build like some confidence, at least like whether it's false or true. You know, you can say, well, we think we know these guys, so that plays into the mental aspect, I think, a little bit.
Yep.
Same with majors too. Just the day before, like in the group format, for example, like LA last year, like we watched every team we were gonna play in our group with EG, BDS, and Secret. So yeah.
You talk about the mental aspect, and I guess this sort of ties into what I feel about Gen G, right? Firstly, how much do you watch a team, say Gen G, and try and, I guess, emulate what they're doing? Like, are you ever looking at teams that are better than you or performing better and being like, okay, how do we do that? And is it play style stuff, or is it maybe like team environment stuff or work ethic, like things like that?
We used to steal stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
Especially from when it was the big 3. So this is a long time ago. We would try to take stuff from Cloud9 and Energy all the time. Like I used to tell the guys, like, you guys should watch Justin's boost pad pathing sometimes and just try to copy that because it's so good. Watch how Energy steal back boost. Watch how Cloud9 counterattack you. Like, have good defense so that you just get so many counterattacks possible. You just dominate stuff like that. But I don't think it's the same as much as these days because there's so many different teams to watch out for. And people can just be upset very quickly. Like Gen G's dynasty right now, can you call it a dynasty? Because it might be upturned very quickly. So it's kind of a gamble to try to take some stuff from teams that are unproven over the short, or only proven in the short term.
Jazzy,
And
can you go close to your mic? You just
trying to learn from teams like Gen G who have only proven themselves in the short term and not the long term is kind of a risk, in my opinion.
I mean, you can still like pick up on what they like to do tendency wise, like out of defense or on offense. Like that's still really helpful. But a lot of issues that for me, like what I try to focus on is more stuff internally because I feel like that's far more important. Because like we can look at like G2 or like even Gen G, all these teams that are putting in work and like how they communicate with each other. That far outweighs no matter how many times we try to counter their playstyle. Because even if we try to counter the playstyle, if we're like falling apart internally, it does not matter at the end of the day. That's just on us.
Yep.
Well, that's what I was going to say is like, how much is it, I guess, because for me, for Gen G, it's not like, wow, they've just figured out a certain way to play the game. It just feels like they've come together with just the perfect, or right now, I guess the perfect like style or just team composition, should I say. Like you got Jack, who's got like the work ethic, sort of just like keeping everyone in check. And then Nolly, like game day, keeping everyone locked in, got the good mental. And then you've got the young gun Chronic who doesn't go off the rails and I guess troll screams, or like you got the mechanical god that like is being kept on track by the other two, and everyone's just so locked in, like they've found it's like they're in a permanent honeymoon phase that they have just been able to maintain, I guess, for a while. And obviously Alu's come in and helping just, with the finishing touches.
I think you nailed something there. So since joining Power, younger demographic, I've had a few people reach out like, hey, I'm GC something, I want to get into a team, I want to start forming teams. And I noticed that one of the biggest pieces of advice that I've sort of given to people sort of getting into teams now is that you got to recognize that you bring a whole lot more to a team than just your gameplay, for better or for worse, right? Like you as a whole professional, right? Like how you engage with players, how you engage with the org, like how you're communicating, what are your routines and your training and so on and so forth, right? And then the longer that I've been coaching for, the more I've noticed just how big that actually impacts your longevity and your performance. So, I remember like taking a look at Gen G, right? Like they were proper workhorses. Like I was very impressed with just their work ethic, how engaged they were. They seemed to have a great relationship with each other. Their professionalism seemed quite high. And that's just me from the outside looking in. I don't know what the internal workings are, but yeah, I certainly lean into like, hey, like as an esport athlete, you bring so much more, for better or for worse, than just your gameplay, which is what people see in the pitch. Like, like the fan base that watches Rocket League, they only see sort of the outcome, what happens on the field, right? They never get to see the sort of inner workings or the extra yards or the preparation that you're putting in, right? So, and that's just lean into that. So I do think that you're onto a good spot, CJ, and that Gen G have sort of got that great synergy and chemistry as just a professional entity in the game.
Facts. Yeah. I think you just summed it all up. Like I think I don't know. I certainly worked out, as I said, having LBP as a coach, even just getting on the mental side of things, that like everyone's pretty close mechanically, individually. Obviously, there's some teams that are better than others, players that are clearly better than others. But I think in like a 3v3 format, it's not really always just that player that like, I know you say, I'm sort of, everyone's going to be like, oh, but you see like Vatira just 1v3 carry. I know there's players or times or series where players just carry individually, mechanically, nothing else to it. But I really think the biggest differences, the biggest gaps is always the mental side of things. Like we talk about teams honeymooning when, everyone's just throwing caution to the wind, but you can really replicate that, I think, in terms of just having the most positive, I guess, team environment, everyone playing for the team, everyone just locked, even just comms. Like I feel like comms slip up so much because people just can't be bothered like letting their teammate know that they're behind them, or beta flick, like just little things that people just like miss, or they're not just fully locked in, or they're not willing to play too much as a team. They might be worried too much about how they're playing individually than like what they need to do or what's the best for the team in that moment. I just think that, and this ties into, I guess, what coaches do. I think that the probably the underrated role isn't purely, if we just figure out X play style, Y play style will win, is like, how do I get my players as connected as possible?
Yeah, and you've completely like hit the point there. A lot of the job is man management and just figuring out, like you said, because like people, like players will have what they believe is the most important aspect of the game. You won't always have three players that just completely agree on that. It's figuring out how do you piece those aspects together and how do you make it like a big picture for the team, and figuring out, well, how does this aspect of the game tie into this, which will make this other part better. And also, like, it changes week to week. Like players will think one thing is really important about the game, and then the next week they'll think a different thing is important about the game. And it's just like this constant ongoing, almost like painting your drawing. And it's like it's just kind of never stopping, and you have to like keep piecing it together and eventually make something out of it. So it's a lot of man management, and it's a lot of just managing relationships with your players and between the players. It's super important, especially with, like we were saying earlier, just how important it is to play your best on the day, and kind of bringing your game and your style, getting everyone to buy in and everything like that.
Which is funny because it reminds me of the conversation we've had years ago on this show, where it's like, who would you rather build a team around, mechanics, or what? Like, what I mean, like, what would you prioritize? Communications, mechanics? I can't remember something else, and I said communications is probably the number one, because like you can't build a game plan or play style consistently without communicating with each other as a team. And that's like a really big thing, because if you're not communicating, you're not going to be confident in each other on the field. You're going to start hesitating. You're going to start doing things you don't usually do. You're just not going to feel comfortable. You feel like you're playing ranked solo, standard, solo twos. You're just going with the flow and hope it works. And then when it doesn't work, it just goes downhill.
Yeah, and communication's a huge one too. So I've CE, we're known to, you have one bad regional, you split up, right? And after talking to a lot of players, it seems that there's obviously in-game comms; those are super important. But then when I've spoken to some players, like, hey, like, what strategies did you take to try mitigate the issue, or did you try communicate it? And a lot of the times I hear people are so non-confrontational that they just let the team fizzle out, die, it ends, or it just eventually, explodes, right? And it's like, oh wow, it's like if this team actually had some degree of communication, they probably could have resolved these issues, right? And that's sort of why I've got a big emphasis. So a lot of the teams that I've been on have sort of stuck around for the trial of time, and I do love doing that. Obviously, you do have roster transitions, like these things naturally happen, but I think when you see these teams that have stood the test of time, I think a good part of it can be excellent communication, in just how you problem solve, how you plan, and everything else. It's sort of like that glue that connects all people, right? Like, I mean, how hard would it be to be a team if you couldn't communicate to each other? But certainly the opposite is true. Like, if you have poor communication, right, that's actually harmful. And we've all experienced this before at some point in our career, where it's like, oh, that's not the way to communicate or try and move forward. Can also be quite harmful as well. So it's certainly a huge thing to be aware of, at least.
Yeah.
I will say, someone in the chat just said Satthew taking notes, but I'll say a little CNC here. Satthew probably came into a team that has probably reportedly the best comms in and out of game in the entire scene.
Yeah,
So
comms definitely. I definitely came into a really good situation, but at the same time, and I think it's something like Genji could go through. But when we first picked up Atomic after that first regional, like, it felt like we were untouchable for like quite a bit of time. We won that second regional, and then we did well the third regional. I think got third, and then went to LA and won LA, and then won the next two regionals, and then made the final for the next regional, and then London. Issues came out because I think we had gotten past that phase where it felt like issues really couldn't arise. It felt like everyone was putting their full foot in, like everyone was going full foot forward. They really wanted to just find every single issue and just mark it out. If someone messed up, they took blame for it, moved on. There was no, any like tension or anything that could just kind of be swept under the rug, that eventually teams go through. So we had to like hit a new level of off-field communication and just like understanding. And I think every team goes through it. And I think when you see a team going through a bad period, they're probably going through that because everyone's good at the top levels, good at the game. It's not too often a strategy, or lack of strategy. It's more of something's not being communicated or something's not being tended to as it should be.
Well, you said it. The communication is just. I've been the biggest advocate for it, and I love talking to coaches because I feel like we're all like. I'm not this player that just like, no, if you just play better, like if you just didn't miss that ball or something, like we would have won or whatever. Like there's so much more to it, and I think that still it's crazy to think that like so many, like the highest level, the best players in the world still are just missing that massive side of the game in terms of like team cohesion and trust, things like that. Like I'll pick a random team out. Like if I'm on phase, right? And just knowing in the back of my mind that, you know, if I'm not playing well, like I could be on the chopping block, or just knowing that you don't have the full trust of your teammates, or, you know, they'll back you up no matter what, you know, just things like that add like massive difference, can affect your play just enormously in terms of like overall teamwork, how they're playing on the pitch, how you playing individually or mechanically. It might not be the fact that you're nervous, or it could be mitigated by the fact that, you know, you might not have the trust or backup of your teammates or stuff like that. So I think that's still the biggest. People were still like, oh no, I just need to. If I just had this player, if I just had that player, if we just picked up that, or if we just changed our play style, we'd win. Without realizing, like Jimmah said, the other factors that people are bringing to the team that aren't just, you know, their car on the pitch. Like it's just, it's massive.
Yeah. It's always fun.
CJ. Okay.
I was just saying, it's always finding that balance of, like CJ was talking about, like, you know, you can just miss a ball, but it's like, well, what was caused by, was that, you know, team-oriented play? Was, you know, was there something else going on in the field that causes that was our own doing, or was execution not there? That's also like a whole big hurdle. That's you constantly have to avoid dancing around and have to go at head first. So it's So go ahead, Jezza.
No, I was going to say, CJ, I wonder how much regret are you having not having a proper coach outside of like a mental coach, having these geniuses next to you.
Well, no, I'm not dissing. I think LVP was, as I said, the best coach I had in terms of like he was awesome like a mental coach. But as I said, I didn't have the gameplay side of things, but we were big on this sort of stuff like team cohesion, which is why I'm glad even you guys, who a lot of you are more, I guess, could be seen in the scene as purely like, not purely, but like more gameplay side of things, like the smarter coaches still see, you know, how important, how vital it is, like the not just play style, not just if you sit in X position, we'll win it, we'll beat this team. Like, and as I said, I just think it's wild how even things like having sports psychologists and stuff, like players still shy away from that so much and just go, no, it's not my mindset. It's not, you know, I get nervous, but I don't want to deal with it. Like, I'm fine. Don't worry. It's just, I just had a bad series. I'll regain next time. Like, they don't want to confront issues. And it's the same thing as Jimmah said with teams that break up. Like, even at the top, trust me, like, even at the highest level, players are still so scared to talk about mistakes or talk about what you want to see from other players. They'd rather bottle it up and just forget about it until it explodes after a really rough series or a rough tournament. And then all of a sudden, this tiny issue has become this massive issue in one player's head or two players' head without anyone else realizing it. Like, people are still so afraid to I guess, deal with issues, even at like the best teams.
Yeah.
We're still so juvenile, I guess, in that sense.
Yeah, everyone is just young. That is.
Well, realistically, ask yourself, when you were 15, were you ever open to talk about things like that?
Well, exactly.
No.
Yeah, it's maybe it's something
It's
to do
hard,
with this
man.
esports.
It's not easy. It's not easy.
It's not easy as a 23-year-old. Got to be honest.
Exactly. It's true.
It's an important people skill, and so that's why I welcome, you know, more sports psychologists getting into the scene. I think would be a huge help.
Okay, let me circle back to the answer you gave earlier, Satthew. Then, we were talking about if adjustments would become more prevalent as like our current format progresses. Did you think about how players are starting to get older and staying in the scene longer and getting more mature and probably are getting closer to being able to take that constructive criticism and that actual discussion between games? and it might end up being more receptive to it, and it might get to be a bigger advantage?
I think I just gotta see more players sticking around longer. I know I have like an older team and I know they're sticking around, but I want to see like just consistently around the scene that like we actually have a bunch of players. Because I don't know, I think new kids are still coming in and I think they're taking the top spots, and I think it's like we're still being fostered in new players at like the same age that they came in, in past seasons. And I think they're still playing at their same lifespans. I think with the G2 guys, I just got extremely fortunate with guys who just have incredible longevity. So, yeah.
I don't know. I'm still getting the kind of sense that people are sticking around longer, and it's kind of less frequent that we're getting these 15, 14-year-old up and comers.
Yeah.
Like, how long? Who was before Zen? It must have been Daniel and Aqua, right? At the same time.
Yep. Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And how long
And
ago was that?
Oski and a Tao.
Yeah, Oski and Tao. What'd you say?
How long ago were those? I don't remember. It's all
I mean,
together.
Rob, you're the coach.
Year and a half.
Yeah.
Year around there.
Yeah.
So you got a year and a half from when Dan entered the scene onto a professional team to when Zen is now turned 16 and can join a team. Is that it seems less frequent than it used to be. I feel like I remember a lot of like up and comers just popping in and just dominating. Not dominating, but like showing what they're made of since like the Justin days.
Well, that's because everyone back then we were like 13 years old. Like First Killer, Atomic, all of them were super young. Beast Mode, 2Ps, all those type of players you just know about. But
yeah, and I think we had a lot of
just wasn't developed back then.
And we had a lot of older players that like just needed to be replaced. Like I think like
The gatekeepers.
you just had the gatekeepers were still very prevalent, and like it's starting to flatten out now in terms of like peak. I'm not saying the peak is we've reached or anything, but like it's definitely slowed down a bit. So I think back then we had a bunch of new players come in because there were a lot of bad old players to take out, I think. In my opinion.
I mean, that
it was
could
all
also
politics too with league play.
And a lot of politics with league play.
I mean,
was
that could
just-
cause extra longevity increases, right? Like if you're bringing in higher quality players,
Yeah.
theoretically they last longer.
So
You
that,
get
but
more
that's what I'm
development.
saying. Like, I gotta see these guys
Yeah.
actually have a longer lifespan before I can like make a conclusion on if this is actually the case or like that's actually happening in front of us. I'm not sure yet.
So it's on the span of like years, not so much like
Yeah.
a few splits, but maybe a few seasons.
Yeah.
You
I'm
know,
also worried
seasons.
about potential eventual burnout with like how much more the boys are playing in general though.
Yeah.
With just the current format. Like it's been talked about. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I think that's also a factor that we may have to look into, and maybe in league play those guys would have stayed around longer, but now maybe that won't be the case. Maybe we'll get the exact same lifespan. Who knows?
What kind of solutions do you think for burnout are there? Please don't shy away from this topic. We love it.
Okay. Burnout. I mean, it's really important, I think, to set like a structure within the team, saying like these are when we can take like healthy breaks and not. But from like the system standpoint, I mean, I always thought like a 2-split year would be cool, but some people don't like the idea of a long off season. There's a lot of, but I watch traditional sports. I like soccer or football for the Europeans, and like they finish in like May or June and come back in like late August or something. I like that kind of break, but I don't know if that's realistic with esports and how much visibility is needed throughout the year to maintain like the actual like economic ecosystem of an esport. So that's why I think 2 splits would be cool, but and then a worlds, but I don't know. That's
when you have your off-season lands like Gamers 8 and DreamHacks and Beyond the Summits and all that. Like hell yeah.
I will say when those happen in off
exactly
season, it feels so bad to decline them. Like how many teams declined Gamers 8 do you think that were like either regretted it or felt so bad doing it? Like Moist.
I think quite a few did, especially when they saw like the actual accommodations there. I think
Cool
I mean, Rob, you were there. Yeah.
I mean, the only thing I didn't like about it was having to travel that long. That's the only problem. But you already know you're going to get treated like a king out there.
Yeah,
at least that's what I thought.
Yeah, it was they definitely accommodated, and I think people, and they had the hotel practice rooms. Everyone loves those.
Oh my goodness.
It's
great.
Rob's
Yeah.
not even a
Awesome.
player, but you see his reaction, like he loves it.
My own hotel room too, not having a room with someone, peak.
Beautiful.
Look,
Beautiful.
we
Awesome.
can. I know Jarzo's a format Frank. He always wants to get on there. I want to get back though to the young mechanical. We're talking about Zen. We're talking about the players. I want to know about the future of Rocket League as coaches. Is it coming from young guns on the up, or as I said, is it more? Are we still yet to, I guess, fully uncover the mental side of things and like seeing what Gen G are doing? You know, it's not just like the 3 most mechanical players in the world, or is there room for just mechanically different players? Like let's just say Zen comes in. How much of an impact is him just being mechanically better going to have versus having the best like team composition or having a Gen G like outfit?
Yeah, I think that in that conversation, I remember, was it like a month ago, everyone was sort of talking about like super teams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think when people talk about super teams, their criteria is these guys have got the most goated mechanics. They just kill everyone, and that's basically it. And that's their criteria of a super team. Whereas to me, it's like I'm almost willing to challenge that and go, hey, like, would a super team involve? Yeah, like you can't have to be the jack of all trades. It's that you're very much like a very how to describe this is, yeah, you've got the mechanics, you're fantastic, but to some degree it's like you have to have that communication, you have to have that professional engagement. There's just so much to it, right? And I do feel like there's this there's this balanced, it's kind of like, think of it like an RPG, right? You know, people put their stats into strength and dexterity, intelligence, right? You know, and maybe some players, they invest all their points into mechanics, right? And you know, and that, don't get me wrong, like that can work though. But I would love to see, it's like, hey, like, you know, 3 of the most mechanical players team up and see how that would stack up against, say, like a Gen G that have so much more than just mechanics working for them. Obviously, I don't have an answer to it because, you know, we've yet to sort of see these things get tested through. But, you know, when you really think back at the really successful teams, it seems to be, it's like, it wasn't mechanics necessarily at the cornerstone of what made them work. It's sure they have mechanics, they're top tier players, but at the same time, there were other elements too that aren't necessarily seen on the actual stage itself, right? And that's sort of like my only question. It's like, hey, if we talk about super athletes or super esport athletes, what else makes them super, that supplement their mechanics, let's just say. That's sort of what I'm kind of flagging there as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think before the show started, we were kind of, someone mentioned the NRG roster when they picked up Turbo, and I never thought Turbo was the most mechanical or the most pure skill, but he did dominate the field.
Yeah.
And I considered that like an at present super team. Like, not, they wouldn't be a super team now, but at the time I was like, how are you going to compete with that? And it's not because Turbo is this crazy mechanical god like Justin, but you kind of put those 2 pieces together and it kind of formed a super team of the time.
It's more so he wasn't like a superstar player. It's just like what value he brought on LAN. He played on what? How many teams on LAN, and he's always gotten first place somehow or top 8 on like many different rosters. He brings so much value in that aspect. So he becomes like a superstar in himself.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was still mechy though, like Johnny said. He honestly, he was like the OG like LAN ice, like just always was able to sort of step up. You know, even when he owned goals in Game 5 finals.
I wouldn't say he's more mechanical than Fiber. They're probably on par, if not. I feel like Fireburner was a little bit better mechanically. It's just like he just was always in the best position compared to Fireburner. Yeah, and when it came down to pressure, he played better.
I mean, he was I wouldn't
say better mechanics.
I think that was still during the days where it's like, were players actually like translating from online to LAN, and like Turbo like pretty consistently translated. And I think it was before everyone translates like they do now, or almost everyone.
I don't know. Johnny keeps saying that Turbo had better match.
Turbo is, I don't know. I didn't think
Turbo
was
what's mechy though? Like, is it's like, you know, are we talking 5-star skill moves, or are we talking just consistently? You know, I think that Turbo's positioning was just flawless. Like, he just always it just set him up for success.
That's not mechanics. That's like decision making.
Always had a good read and awareness. Like, he just had way better awareness.
He was faster to the ball
and reads.
Johnny
says the ball isn't mech. So.
Faster ball could be all based on your positioning. If you have the same like fast aerial speed as another player, Like comparing Turbo to
Yeah.
Fire, of course Turbo's gonna be faster to the ball because why? Turbo had better decision making and
But-
planned around his path on the field better.
So my
My-
definition of mechanics is different. Like my mechanics is
Yeah.
like what you do with the ball,
Well-
not where you read
Yeah.
the ball faster. You know what I mean? Like
Either way, like, yeah, if you put Turbo and Fireburner in a head-to-head, I don't think it's like, hey, thank goodness Turbo brought all of these advanced mechanics that Fireburner didn't have, and that's what made the difference. I think, his real value were a multitude of other things that he brought to the team, right? It wasn't like, someone cloned Justin and now it's like, hey, now we have two mechanical gods on the team. It was, hey, he brought something else. Yeah, like, you can probably head-to-head and, you can make a case for Fireburner having excellent mechanics or Turbo having better, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, I don't think I never saw a Reddit thread being like mechanical god Turbo Pulsar has joined NRG and everyone's like, that's what they needed, right? He brought a lot more to the table. So yeah.
Yeah, when you think about it, nearly all the LAN teams, it was never just like three, zero brains, full mech. There's always at least a lot of the time there's a general, to a lot of it, or just a player holding it down. Even you look at, I guess you could say the most mechy team at the time mechanically ahead would have been like Cloud9 Season 6, but they still had top right Tommy like locking it down, whilst Gimmick.
Oh, he wasn't top right Tommy back then.
Yeah, he was MVP Tommy. He wasn't just he was everywhere.
He was New Wave Gibbs, if I'm being honest.
New Wave Gibbs. Yeah, there's always someone locking it down, which is, again, we have all. It feels like we have all the historical proof of what, like, the recipe for success. Even you see Gen G now, like, Nolly admits that he's not the most mechanical player or best individually, but what could he bring that's better than everyone else in other areas? Like, we have so much proof from previous LAN winners, the most successful teams, about not just having, 3 15-year-olds that can just clip on kids as the recipe for success, but feels like we still harp on that so much, like how good someone is individually, purely on mechanics. Like, I know a lot of people still say, they love, the generals and stuff, but it's really not as talked about enough, I guess, what else you bring into the team. And a lot of the time as well, when people talk about roster changes, it's like, well, they got to kick that guy because he's the worst player on the team. And by worst player, they mean like he's not clipping on kids. He's not the one hitting the flip resets, but it might be, well, the other person might be like toxic, or they might not be, bringing the most to the team. They might not be showing up all the time for scrims or showing up with bringing their best attitude. They might be hindering the team in other ways. But at the same time, they're intangibles or things that, the Reddit or the public can't see. So it's hard for them to judge on that, like comms.
Okay, real quick. Johnny just said the formula is 2 1v1 mains and 1 glue. It's obvious that he just said Nolly is the glue of Gen G, but is Jack actually a ones main?
He was.
Well,
at
yeah,
one point.
he was
like
always
one best.
ranked ones, absolute fiend. Getting onto that, what I was saying about like Pete, I guess the public not knowing about comms and stuff. The best example I have is the Dignitas comms. Remember the Astral drama about, oh my god, Astral's toxic, because they just, for the first time, the public are hearing team comms, but like that was their only like test study was the Dignitas comms. If they realize like how many other players can be way worse than what Astral was doing in terms of just like not comming or not talking, then they'd have such a different opinion on so many players, I reckon. Like if they just had a grasp on behind the scenes what players are doing, like their attitude or what they're bringing to scrims, or if they're doing toxic comms, or if they're, I don't know, if they're sighing, or if they're, like there's so many different things that if Reddit people knew, they would never be. They wouldn't just go, oh, this guy's got better mechanics, so, he needs to get better teammates. They think, wow, like, this player's actually holding that team back, or that player's holding that team back because of those things. But it was only because the Astral one became public that everyone just went, Astral's toxic. Like, if they realized that that's, most teams could have 1 or 2 players that are like that a lot of the time, then, people would form such different opinions and probably have a different idea of how a successful Rocket League team operates and how much that can hinder teams.
It's like telling teams don't double commit. It's like there's a lot of factors that go into a double commit for why things like that happen. So it's just, and a sidebar as well is like, I can't believe they released a cons video to expose Astral like that. I would never do that to any of my players. That's so messed up.
Yeah.
Could never do that.
But to segue into something that you were saying before, CJ. So I had a question. This is going back in late 2020, 2021. I had a question that was like, why, it's when we had Amphis, Torsos, and Express, and the question was like, hey, like why do you have Express on when you got these up and coming kids? Surely you just replace him. And just for those that don't know the context, Amphis, very highly mechanical player. Tors, still in that contention of being a very top mechanical player as well. And you could see that Express, mechanically wise, wasn't in the same tier. Like, he had mechanics, don't get me wrong, he could still hit the ball, but he wasn't in that same caliber that you see like with an Amphis and stuff. And one of my answers was, it's like, well, I value what he brings to the team because he still made it to the top in spite of not having those mechanics. Clearly, he's found a niche that's working for him. And I see that really valuable to bring to the team, right? Like, I love how unique players are. They have like different ideals. What's the best way to play? What do I value more? Am I going to work on these things versus these, right? And as Satthew really well pointed out, sometimes it is painting a picture, like combining these things. And I find that some of these players that don't their method isn't, so long as I can triple flip reset and 1v3 the whole team, I'm doing a great job. There are some players that are like, well, they've worked out another dimension to make it to the top. And I think if you can tap into that and synthesize that with your team, it's really quite valuable. Sorry. But if there are, obviously there are limitations that, you can't have bronze mechanics and just be like, have the world's best communication. There has to be some level of balance, but I certainly value when there's some differentiation, there's some diversity in how players view and play and value the game.
I just think it's so hard. It's like so hard to quantify, I guess, what you need. How do you as coaches then, if you're not performing, how do you find the problem areas? What do you say? Is it sometimes obvious? Is it like, okay, we need like, what's going on with our communication? What's going on with our mentals in the bin? Or is it sometimes like, wait, why are we not winning? Like, is it hard to figure out sometimes?
I'll put it to you that the CJ Rocket League is not that insanely hard strategically compared to like other esports. It's very cut and dry, like what's in front of you to find like problems. Usually I have like a formula that I narrow down, like why are we messing up or what exactly are we messing up, and then I check that box and I'm like, okay, let's fix that. It's not about like, oh my god, they are doing something magical with the ball. It's like, no, it's just like a lot of issues that we have, whether it be communications, how we're rotating. It's not very difficult in that sense, I think.
Yeah, Rob's nailed it. It's easy to, especially if you're not, again, tending to it, to kind of get lost in other aspects of it, but it's usually pretty straightforward. And that's, you had asked earlier about like Gen G and like looking at, is Gen G doing something exceptionally crazy? It's more so looking at, okay, like they're playing this situation right, or they're playing this aspect of the game right. What are we doing wrong, or like where had we lost it at some point and aren't continuing like they are? I think I agree with Rob. It's pretty straightforward with the meta, at least currently. The meta can change from time to time. We've gone through a couple of them, but I think a lot of people have kind of revolved around a certain way to play as of recent, especially in EU and NA, and I think it's pretty cut and dry on what's right and what's wrong currently.
I've always said Rocket League is very like rock paper scissors. Like if you know someone's booming the ball, you're not going to just press up.
Yeah.
You know someone's going to catch the ball. You're not going to let them have space. It's very simple.
Yeah.
The thing
and that's like,
go ahead.
Oh no, you go, CJ.
No. I'm diverting.
Yeah, and I think Chrome just nailed it, right? It's like, it can be seen as rock paper scissors. So people are like, oh, what's your strategy for this team? What's the strategy for that team? And it's like, hey, if we know a team just always keeps the ball close and slow and solos it all the time, it doesn't matter necessarily if what team does that. There are certain themes that go through. If a player's booming the ball consistently, right? It's not, you don't necessarily have to theory craft every individual team, every individual player versus every individual like period of their career, right? You can start to identify certain things. And I remember it wasn't necessarily BM, but it was a really funny thing. Like when we got shut out by V1, right? Like we didn't score a goal against them, even though they were like 1 or 2 goal games. They had all the control, right? They walked away and basically said something along the lines like, "Yep, that was a perfect strategy. We knew it was going to work." Something along those lines. And even though they never actually played against us, they could recognize, I guess, that rock paper scissors. Like, powered lean this way. We've seen how they work. You know, we've played against other teams that have a similar approach. And what they did, like I said, even though the 1-2 goal games, people are like, "Oh, you nearly had them." It's like, no, they were in control that whole time. They had it really figured out. So I think that's I think, you know, sometimes people are like, "Oh, coaches must really, you know, they must have hundreds of pages for a team." It's like, actually, it's a lot more. Like sometimes overcomplicating it will likely be a hindrance. Like you probably find that, you know, you'll actually go
overthinking.
backwards. Yeah, you really start over predicting, overthinking it and everything else.
The thing that frustrated me, or it still does, even though I'm not playing anymore, is like, you guys will know it. Yeah, like when everyone's just locked in, right? And the comms are on, like it's just like, yeah, got it. Yeah, no worries. Like, yeah, I'm behind. Yeah, I got the pop. Like everyone's just so locked in. Like there's feeling in the comms, and it's just like there's nothing else matters in that game. Like no one's nervous, no one's second guessing themselves. Everyone's on the same page, and like you have those series where, as like Satthew said, like when you guys felt, I guess, indestructible. That was probably like you guys every series. Like you guys were just so locked in, and almost in the moment you just feel so good. Like you're just like, this is ridiculous. And teams have this when like their backs are against a wall a lot of the times, or you see teams where nothing's on the line anymore. They just throw caution to the wind, and all of a sudden they just get on this run and they just lock in. Like we see it in OCE all the time when teams can't make the major anymore, or these upset teams, which we might see this weekend. We say an optic. Like all of a sudden they just lock in, and there's no nerves, there's no feeling about it. They just all as a team, like as one unit. But you just can't. It's so hard to replicate that. It's like the most frustrating thing, because then you jump on another day and there's just, you know, someone's just like, "Oh, you're behind." Yeah, I'm behind. Like you start missing those little comms, or you're just not as quite, you know, you're not quite as switched on, or someone's maybe a bit tilted. Like, I don't know. I feel like Rocket League, it's so hard. Yeah, it's so hard to be consistent. But at the same time,
it's very hard to fabricate that emotion. It's very hard.
But at the same time, it's so simple.
Those teams have,
you know what I mean?
It seems simple. The idea is simple.
Yeah.
Right. But Optic this weekend, they're gonna show you like you can't fabricate it. They're just gonna do it because there's literally nothing riding on them. Like you can't fabricate either the lack of pressure or the actual legitimate motivation.
Yeah.
To have that emotion in your comms, you have to have the natural motivation.
Yeah.
Or the lack of pressure, which is
and what you're describing sounds like, you know, what a lot of athletes call the flow state. CJ, you know, like your mind isn't like, "Oh, if I miss, I might kick." You know, you're just playing it play by play. You're in the moment. You're not distracted. You're honed in at exactly what you're doing,
and you're like three steps ahead at all times.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's just, and that, you know, and if you talk to a sports psych, they'll say that's like the center of the bullseye of where you want to be in that flow state, right? And you know, and it's, you know, and while I guess Jarzo leaned into it, it's like, yeah, it's a simple thing in principle, right? Like we all have moments of flow state. Maybe it's a song you're listening to. Maybe, I don't know, you're really good at sewing. I don't know, right? Whatever it is. You know, and like there's so much value in that. And it's such a really, I guess it's kind of like mysterious in a way, right? That's why we pay, you know, good money for a sports psychologist to be like, "Hey, what does the literature say about this?" And it's like, "Oh, well, here's a massive study on NBA players and here's some of their routines to help enable it to come," right? And I think, you know, you've nailed it, because a lot of players. So I've had a few people, you know, write to us like, "Hey, is that really how you comm? It just sounds like incomprehensible nonsense." And I'm like, "Trust me, the players know exactly what they're communicating. You know, they're just in that flow state. It just works. It plays out really well." So yeah.
But it takes one player to not be in it. Like just not be, and it just like Rocket League, not like any other sport where you can sort of do it yourself. Like Rocket League is 3-man comms at all times. Like, because it's so fast, you're always on the ball. It's not like basketball where you can just like, you might be sitting in the corner and you're not a part of the play or something. It's just it can just take one person to like throw off that, like just such an imbalance on the whole team. It's the most frustrating thing, because you just have those games or those tournaments where it's just, you're like, wow, like we can do that every time. And then just one little thing happens or one person's not quite as switched on, and you can just play so much different. Like, it's just so differently. You can just affect everyone's mental, or then people start, getting nervous or miss comms. Oh, I hate it. It's the most frustrating part of the
beautiful,
game.
man. That's why it goes hand in hand with communications and then playing on point. It's like the hardest thing. Get into that flow state without getting distracted because of nerves or whatever factors.
Yeah.
It's tough,
And
man.
I could argue. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that flow state comes with a lot of, like, when you combine three good players that are really motivated. When they first form as a team, that honeymoon phase is kind of like a synthetic flow state that you get for a bit. That like you said, CJ, like, those like little comms missing one day, or certain touches or certain decisions being made differently someday. That's like the constant tending to that I think like a good coach does in like the modern Rocket League game. It's like that constant, are we making the same decisions as we did yesterday? Are we playing the scenarios the same way that we prescribed as a team? And that's like what I think is like the biggest battle as a coach, and I think is like the biggest task and biggest hurdle, and is like the biggest just obstacle you come to as a coach, and it's super difficult. It's definitely one of the hardest things I've tackled in my life, but I think all that's like the 99% of the battle, it feels like.
And that's the thing too. Usually when players are in that flow state, they don't realize what they're doing that is really good sometimes in the moment. And even when you bring it up, it's like it's hard for them to replicate, because then they start overthinking, like, oh, I did this last time. I didn't usually do this before. So it's the constant battle of like your thoughts and what you think is right and what's wrong.
Yeah.
I think CJ, what you're saying, I would argue that there are sometimes the opposite, how one person can kind of break the flow state. I think if you have a good environment, both in a good set of three personalities and a good support staff, you could have one person elevate the other two. You could have the complete opposite of what you're saying. You could have one person inject a little bit of flow state into how the team is playing, and everybody gets elevated to that state.
It's,
for instance, back when the GT roster was Chicago, Rizzo, and JNaps. Rizzo kind of had a tendency to not calm as much, but Reed, on the other hand, is he's very, I don't want to say motivational, but he's very passionate. At least at the time he was.
Yeah.
And he definitely elevated. It was kind of like a chain reaction. He would elevate JNaps, and then them combined elevated Rizzo.
Yeah.
So it was a very like one person brought the team up just like sequentially. And it was kind of
That's
the
happened to
direct
us against
opposite.
Energy as past regional, where we were just like kind of down into the dumps. Like, we played complexity, we were playing how we wanted to, but we just could not score against that team, and they just beat us on a defensive clinic. And then we go into Energy, it's the same thing, where you feel confident and we just can't score, and then they steal that first game because of a defensive mistake, and then steal the second game because of a defensive mistake. And then just like out of nowhere, Arsenal just drags us across the finish line, steps up, really elevates our team, and we just completely destroy that team on a reverse sweep. All it takes is one person sometimes.
Yeah. And that's that like goes so understated by the community, like just how much of an effort that actually takes, because that like keeps y'all like it's a much better major picture for y'all, like winning that series. Because you lose that, and it's a lot of uncertainty around it, right? So I mean, it's just like it's leaps and bounds what he does when he does something like that for the team. It's just crazy.
It also brings us back to like what Jimmah was saying, was like with super teams, like bringing someone on like Nolly for Gen G. Like, for all we know, Nolly probably is that guy. He's the one guy that brings up the motivation level and brings up the grind, and
I'm pretty confident he is that guy. I think I've heard. I think they've said it themselves, but Nolly is that guy on game day. I think CJ mentioned it at the beginning of the show too. Like, on game day, Nolly is that guy, and he is the one to, I think, inject it into the team and really try to calm everyone's nerves, but also like excite them and energize them at the same time.
It almost is like when, we talk about the honeymoon period and stuff. It's like every player, when you're in that flow state, or when you're in the honeymoon period, new team, whatever, all the players are so like malleable in terms of like, if the person in front of them doesn't get the touch they need, it's just like, all right, like, it's all good. I'll get whatever you've got. You know what I mean? But once you start playing for a while, it's like, oh, like he just didn't do that touch. He didn't hit me across. Yeah. You know what I mean? You just become a bit more narrow-minded, and then it's sort of, it builds up, which I think that's why the honeymoon period everyone talks about is because when you're a new team, like nothing can go wrong because you haven't, no one's built tendencies. So you're just sort of like figuring each other out, like, all good, I'll get whatever you do. Oh, okay, that's cool. He's going to solo play that one. That's fine. I'll back him up. Or sweet, he's going to pass it. I'll get there. Whereas once you start playing with each other, you're like, well, I'm not going to go for the infield because I know he's not going to infield it. You know what I mean? I think you just start... I guess not being as workable with each other, but I think when teams do get in that flow state, that's what it feels like. It just feels like everyone's so workable. Like whatever you've got, I've got the next one. You know what I mean? Whatever you do here, I'll back you up. And people like go away from that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like teams get to a point where those touches aren't being made, and at one point it's like you have to see like both sides, or like you need both sides of the equation. You need everyone to still be malleable, but you don't want like the standard to lower. You can't have that like complacency settle in, if you don't set standards, then like issues arise over time. Like again, when I said like our team was cyclical, it was stuff like that. It was, our standards being lowered and a better system needed to be put into place, and just higher standards needed to be set consistently. And that's my job, and that's part of the battle I'm figuring out, and I'm learning a lot from it. So I think a lot of coaches go through that. I'm sure Rob goes through that. I'm sure Jimmah goes through that. I'm sure Jazza went through that. It's like one of the most important aspects is that balance.
One thing you learn is patience, because you can't switch everything and fix everything in a day or in the moment either. You got to build upon it. There's always things that change.
Game at a time, one scream at a time.
Tell me then, Chrome, how frustrating is it when you think that, like, if we just did this, if we just fix X, Y, Z, whatever, like, we would be the best team, but you just can't, like, either one, make those changes at once, or even, like, there's some things you just feel like you can never change. Like, I feel like this is a problem that coaches would go through all the time, just thinking, you feel like at least you know what it takes or what the team needs, but you just don't know how to either solve it or solve it quickly or find a way to get through.
It's tough, man, because like I said, you're working with 3 individuals and you got to make sure they're all comfortable at once and then all on top of each other and motivated. Like I said, it's never really about strategy. I don't feel like I'm ever lost with strategy. I feel like I can easily micro adjust. I feel like that's always been my strong suit, whether it be Rocket League, whatever type of esport. It's just about everyone being on the same page. And that's obviously super frustrating when just things aren't clicking and always trying to find a way to fix it. But there's only so much you can do, I think, in a lot of situations, and you got to go with the flow. All it takes is one good victory and you're back on top.
That's another thing, just with forming a team, and with I think Gen G's case, it's so like natural for everyone to just kind of agree on something, or be very easy and very agreeable on like a certain way to play. Like right when you join a team, it's like it's only like once you get through playing with each other for a while and you start to get to the little nuances of play, that's where teams and players start to divert, and it's bringing that back together. And again, that's why like I love what Gen G's doing. They're all on the same page. They all understand how each other want to play. They're very brutal and upfront about it, which I think is what prolongs how long they've been playing well. But I'm interested to see like when that real bad result comes in, what that's like when you get to the grit of being a team. And I'm excited to see how they handle it. I said this before the major too, when I was on First Touch or something with Noli there, and then they just won the major. So still hasn't happened. But I'm excited.
It will happen.
It will happen. It has to. If it doesn't happen, then I don't know.
Something's wrong.
Esports in a weird spot.
I think I tweeted like after the major seeing Gen G when like it's so cool to see a team that's just not like the most mechanical. Like obviously they're very mechanical. Like Chronic's an absolute freak, Jack's a freak, Noli's still got like fantastic mechanics. But like just seeing the best team, like not the best players win. And I feel like for you guys as coaches, that must be so, I guess, motivating, knowing that like it's not just, oh, we don't have someone, we don't have a Zen. It's like, okay, what are these other factors that we need to like bring up that you can fix for like in your own team?
Yeah.
It helps when you're already confident in your like team as a whole already, and like at least in their potential. I mean that at least for me. I don't know how about Chrome, Satthew, and Jimmah, but for me, it was always I always believed. I almost always had the biggest ego on the team, so it helped that
But
I was always
still,
confident we can make it through, like no matter
I mean,
what.
yeah, I'm the same way now. Like, we're not getting the results that we know we should be getting, but I know we could beat any team on our day because I know we have the talent. The talent's
Yep.
there. There's no
Yep.
question. Like, it's not an issue.
Yeah.
There's no way some of these teams are more mechanically better than us. The same thing. I'm sure FaZe is going through that same thing. FaZe, they have so much damn talent on their team, arguably the more talent than every team in the world, but they're not getting those wins. It's the same thing. Like, every team is beatable. No one's like, it's just my philosophy on things.
That's
why
a
I
good
never feel out of
question.
it, no matter who we play.
I think it's different in OCE, Jimmah, because I feel like we sort of have 3 teams that are just individually also better. But in terms of in NA, I feel like everyone's pretty close right now, mechanics. Like, you know, all the way down to, I don't know, like what, like maybe down to 16. Like everyone, in terms of just individually, everyone's pretty close on mechanics. There's obviously other things that go into it, like positioning, team play. Like, what I want to ask you is how far down the track, let's look at, like, say, like the current NA seeding. Like, what team could still be the number 1 team in NA if they just, I don't want to say they were coached better, but if they just had, if they just found a way to play better as a team, if that makes sense. Like, you look at how Gen G are playing as a team. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like there's teams that are down there that could be good enough. They're good enough individually already. They just haven't figured out the 3v3 Rocket League at the highest level right now. Does that make sense?
there?
Do you think that that's possible?
How far down in NA?
Yeah,
how
like
far down?
how far down can we go? Like, if they just got their shit together as a team.
It's so hard. In fact, I had this exact conversation, or very similar to this one with Banana Head, and it came up because he travelled overseas. Obviously, very nervous. I'm playing against international players, and he put a lot of respect on international players. And then after a few scrims, he quickly worked out, it's like, oh, I thought these guys were going to be like gods among men, right? But it's very minute, like the differences. Like he actually felt like, oh, I could potentially play here. Like I can actually potentially win. And I think he got like 2.4 KMR and 2s. And he's like, oh my goodness, like I'm actually keeping up, right? And, you know, and it's very hard to quantify. And the way I sort of, when I spoke with Banana Head at the time, was it's very similar to like the 100-meter sprint. You know what I mean? It's like, you know, if you train, you know, just as an untrained athlete, you will shave seconds off, no worries. But when you get to the Olympic levels, it takes years of dedication just to shave off an eighth of a second, you know, to get to Usain Bolt's, you know, 9.58 or 5.6, whatever he got. You know, just to get down to, it takes so much. And I think that's like, even though we see that teams are quite close, it's shaving off those final percenters that I think make the difference, right? And it takes those extra whatever it takes, right? Because when you look at, like, I'm sure there are multiple teams that have the same level of mechanics as Gen G. Like, let's say you do Smush, Nolly, Jack, and Chronic all into a team, into like a ball, and you assess their mechanics, right? You do that with every other team, you'd probably find they're in the same kind of ballpark. But there's so many little 1%ers, those tiny little things. It's like, you know, like a 100-meter sprinter, you know, trying to shave off an eighth of a second is like a miracle, right? At that top end. And I wonder if it's quite the same at the top end of Rocket League. Those tiny, minute things that you might not explicitly see that make the difference. And like, I have no answer, I have no position on that, but it's always been a wondering that I've had. And it's more so come about when I compare players from OCE going overseas. It's like, oh, it's like, it's not that different, but it really kind of is. And it culminates in these different results. Like, what really is it?
I love that analogy. Like that extra few milliseconds is the difference between the best teams and not the best teams. Well, I guess that's a good way. Johnny phrased it in a good way. If I know Satthew said 6 or 7, how many teams or how far down can we go in the seeding if they had Gen G's teamwork could be Gen G in terms of they've got it individually. They just need to find it as a team.
6 or 7. 6 or 7.
You're going to have to tell us a 6 or 7. Oh, you already know. Did you know it?
Yeah, I wrote it in chat.
You wrote it in chat. Say it again for the people listening on Spotify.
The top 4, Complexity and Furia. I think like individually have everything, like with all 3 players on each team, have everything you kind of want. And this is like, I'm talking about like getting near or winning a major. I think like if they have the absolute cohesion of Gen G, I think it's like those 6.
Are you including a Gen G in that 6?
Well,
Yeah, top 4.
well,
Yeah. top
Okay,
4.
so are you
Oh,
you're
I see what you
saying
mean.
probably Gen G phase G2 SSG top 4?
Yeah.
Or are you including V1? So you're not
Wait,
including V1.
Sorry. Sorry. NG phase G2 SSG complexity Furia is what I. That's
Okay.
the 6, and then
So
it's
no
like
V1, no NRG, because I have that same
No.
list, but I add V1 and
Yeah.
NRG, and then I cut
they're
it
cl-
off.
it's like they're right there. I don't know.
They're right there. Like that's why I think about like the fact is NRG's done it before, that same roster,
Yeah.
so I kind of had to include them. And then I look at V1 and I see like Beast on a Torment, and I'm like, okay, they probably have to
Yeah.
do it too.
Yeah.
But it's very close. Like those two could easily drop out and make it.
That's
6.
why I'm like, those are my 6 definites. Like, I think that's me also saying like Furia is like underperforming, obviously. And I think they have way more in store than what they're showing. And sorry, yeah, I was looking at overall rankings. That's why I said top 4 that way. But like, complexity. Even though they're 6th overall, I think, and they're showing it this split actually are fantastic. I think they've always had it. I think CRR has actually stepped up a bunch this split and has really kind of gotten up with the other two. Because I think he struggled a little bit with nerf sometimes last split. I think in some big game moments he kind of wouldn't get the touch or wouldn't make the play he needed to. But I think those 6 teams like definitely have the talent to win a major.
See, I think it's more. I think that I know I might be underrating individual ability, but I just think even Chronic spoke about it on a podcast. I'm not sure how long ago it was, but he said like when he first joined Gen G, like he realized how bad his challenges were, and Jack like showed him, just how to challenge in a different way, and he realized how much of a monkey he was playing, or being, and like just like those little things. I think that so many players, even if individually you might think, oh well, they're kind of like stupid. Like I still think that it's if they just had the Gen G teamwork, even their individual little things, they'd be able to fix, like challenge game, like they're not quite challenging for the team, like things like that they have, like everyone can, like I feel like, you go to maybe to the top 11, top 12, or top 10 teams, individually, they can all hit flip resets, they can all chain dash, they can all like do everything. It might just be little things, decision making, which I think comes down to like, if you had a Gen G environment.
That's fair.
That I just think, and which is crazy.
Are you saying it should be deeper?
I think
it's
deeper.
More teams?
Yeah.
Okay.
So who would you add? You would add in like a dig optic. You'd probably add in like Shopify.
Yeah, I'd definitely add in like an optic.
You'd probably add in like Axel.
Oh, well, how far down?
Would you go?
Hang on,
would you go deep like that? Like
I
down to
don't know.
Axel or M80 or Koi?
Like I know Jimmah talks about like the minute, like the milliseconds, but I just think like there's so much to do. If they just had a good environment, they go, okay, like why am I doing that? Like you know what I mean? But individually they've still got it there. They know they can do it. They just need to change their mindset a little bit or rework their threes, I guess.
Yeah. Well, CJ, I guess I'll put it to you in this kind of way. Take Chronic, right? Was it because he's teamed with Jack and Nolly that he's the player that he is now? Like, was he always destined to be this great and win a LAN if he joined any team, or is it because he just happened to get picked up by Jack and Nolly that they've cultivated him in some kind of way? And the only reason why I bring that up is because whenever I see young players, right, they're like weeds. They're going to grow no matter what. However, if you put a weed in good soil, give it like, water and adequate sunlight, like maybe Jack and Nolly, probably a really bad analogy. Jackie, probably really good soil for him. They're just going to flourish even more, right? And I tend to lean towards that way. It's like, hey, maybe if he joined, I don't know, like a Dig or someone else, would he be the player that we know him to be? Or is it because he's in that environment? Jack, I guess he works some kind of, magic in some kind of way. Nolly as well, that he's that's why he is, and I often wonder that because you can't really pilot it, we can't really clone him and spread him out across teams. Like, which one's going to be the most successful Chronic at the end of the season, But at the end of the day, like I tend to lean towards it's like, it is because he teamed with those players that he developed to the player that he is now, and we know him as a professional that we know him as. Or maybe you might message me in my DMs about, hey mate, I was going to be winning majors no matter who I teamed with, mate. I don't know.
No, I agree, and
I don't think it would have happened with any team, but I think there are a few duos that you could have stuck him in with, and he would have done very well. Like you look at like Garrett G as a player, and I feel like he is kind of similar to that, kind of uplifting. He has an uplifting ability. At least if I were to put him instead of Justin, I feel like Garrett and Squishy would have done that. If you had put him in with like a Chicago and J-Naps, he would have been elevated. If you put him in with like, what are some other good duos? Like if you put him instead of Magic Bear, there's a chance that Optic has some better results.
Oh, let's not go too far. But like, what
I'm not saying winning everything. I'm not saying winning everything. I'm just saying better results.
But,
okay. Don't come after me for that. I'm just
the reason like this. Obviously, this question is kind of hard because as people are saying, "Oh, well, you're also including individual improvement." When I'm saying, they're working on challenges and stuff. But as Jimmah said, I'm also weighing in the fact that in the right environment, these players would improve individually. So it's kind of hard to say. I'm not just saying right now, chuck this team of three together, and now they comp like Gen G, and they're gonna be Gen G. I'm just saying like that it feels like like the environment. If they were able to do that, they would then improve individually. I think there's a lot of players that could just completely elevate, like a Chronic said he's done. Even though he had the mechanics, a lot of players have the mechanics. Like Aqua coming up was on a similar par as we said to like a Dan, maybe a little bit less high, but. Like, if they have the right environment, they start thinking about the game differently, they can just completely elevate their game like it's untapped, as sort of John said in chat. But it's hard to, like, quantify that.
Mm. Yeah, I guess I was really thinking... I was really thinking from the perspective of, like, what's already there. But, yeah, I didn't even think about, like, the fully untapped potential. And that's, like, actually a guessing game. I'm not sure. I still think I'm still... pretty confident. Like a good environment can still it's gonna have its limitations. Like players will still have their limit. It doesn't, like you said, it doesn't automatically mean they're just gonna jump to Gen G's level. Even if they are more mechanically advanced than the players currently on Gen G, even with a good environment. I don't know, I guess because good environment's like all encompassing. I think we're making it like, oh, everything's the exact same, but like I don't know. Are comms the exact same? Or is thoughts about the game the exact same? Is play style the same? That's stuff. I don't know.
I think we can agree though, like on a mechanical level right now in Rocket League. I know you still got your Zans and stuff that you're like, okay, he's the future, like he's different, but everyone is like very similar. So like Jimmah said, like it's milliseconds right now in terms of like mechanics, and that's a lot of the time the decision-making things or how you create space for your teammates that oh my goodness, I can't even speak, that allow people to use their mechanics. Like it's so minute right now. Like it's, I feel like there's no more Cloud9s that are just mechanically better.
No, I love how the little things are starting to become what's more pronounced. Like everyone's first touch. Like I know first touch has always been important, but now it's like really important. That's what differentiates like the best from the best, like or the best from the rest. It's like who actually has a proper first touch, who can follow their own touch more consistently, who's going to play the ball into space more often. It's just the little things are now what's really being pronounced, I think.
And at the tippy top, sometimes being 1% better at your first touches takes a lot, right? It takes a lot of effort, and we might say, oh, it's only a little bit better, but it's like, hey, that could have been the difference of X amount of training, how you practice or whatever it might be. Hence why I use the 100-meter sprint one, is that it exponentially gets harder the further you go, right? And those little minute things I feel, definitely make the difference.
Yeah.
It's like motivating but frustrating at the same time, knowing how many teams, as we said, like could be close to winning a major, but don't know how to unlock it or find that extra 1%. It's I guess that's your guys' job though to do it, which is why you're paid the big bucks. But Look, I feel like this has been an incredible 90 minutes. I want to finish with some predictions. I think we've wrapped up the coaching. I feel like I've just had my brain unlocked by you guys, so this has been absolutely incredible. I think we're going to have to do some NA predictions, though. OCE is pretty boring, Jimmah, with the greatest respect to your team, but your team's dead right now. There's no way you're making the major. Not that your team's dead, your split's dead. So we need to go to NA because there could be a 5-way tiebreaker. This could be absolutely ridiculous. So we're going to have to get everyone's predictions for the regional. And then I guess in saying that, the 5 teams. or maybe the potential tiebreaker winners. Like this is nuts.
Okay.
Oh god.
What are we thinking? Who has anyone already pre-jacked this? Anyone pre-jump thought about this one already and have an idea of? Let's give we'll do our usual. So we give a top 4 for the regional, and then our best performing quarterfinal team. So our 5th place, like who's looking the best but loses in quarters for this regional.
So easy.
It's easy.
Yeah.
All right then.
I don't know. If you look at like the recent, you have to. It's just going to be a repeat. It's literally, I mean, I can start if you want me to.
Yeah,
Go for it.
absolutely.
Go, Jazza.
All right. It's Gen G. No, G2 over Gen G in finals. Gen G and Complexity faced off in there. So Complexity and G2 beats FaZe. So both of them get their usual matchups. So Complexity FaZe, 3rd, 4th. And best performing quarterfinal has got to be Dig.
Can you recap those 5 again?
Sure. G2 Gen G, Complexity FaZe, Dig. The strong shot for SSG. Yeah. Unless SSG pulls it out.
Dig make the major.
I'm making the
you know,
Dig.
Jazzo, one of us Fury or G2 plays most likely will play Dig unless Dig gets first place in their groups.
Yep.
Just so you're aware.
For in the quarterfinal, right?
In the round of 12.
And yeah, the
match
right after groups. Because
Change
it's like
that, buddy.
What we're group C, Rob? And they're
it's
group
not
A.
double elim, is it?
You're
I
group
hate this
C, they're
format.
group A.
Yeah, so
hate this
second,
format.
third plays the other second and third from that group. So
We need another 5th then.
I need another 5th. And it can't be give it to
You
SSG.
say M80.
No, I give it to SSG. Why would I give it to M80 when SSG's there? It's between Dig and SSG in the first place.
No, it's us and M80 are tied, and then Dig's a
I
point
can't do
ahead of
SSG
us.
either?
What do you mean? You could do us.
Yeah. Then SSG.
So that's your 5 for the major then as well. Very good.
Yeah.
Very
It was
good.
100% between SSG and Dig for me.
So
like, top 4 is kind of locked, and it's just between.
So you don't have M80 getting top 8, and you don't have Dig getting top 8. There's no tiebreaker, right? In your mind?
Well, that's just for the regional events. Or are you talking about? But
there's still a tiebreaker to make land.
Yeah, but that's not who's making. I'm just saying for like best performing top 8 team in the regional, not the tiebreakers itself. The people who make the LAN, that's tougher.
Well, it's based on this regional, Jazzo, so you sort of tell.
Yeah, but you just said if SSG get 5th, but like, or not, like you can't get 5th. But there'll still be tiebreakers, right?
There'll be tiebreakers if us and M80 tie in quarters or semis.
Yeah.
Yeah,
because they're on equal points right now. Dig has that 1 point advantage, so they can't both those teams have to outperform Dig.
Man, this is tough. The actual
tough,
the major part. The actual prediction, the regional is fine. The actual major.
I think SSG's pulling it out. I got faith in Rob. I think I could see that Dig SSG matchup happening, but I think SSG take it this time. I don't think Rob's gonna let his team lose twice to the same team. I got faith.
Yeah, that'll be cool to see in that round 1 as well. Like, let's say, I don't know how it would happen, because to me, like, Group C just looks terrifying. Like, I feel like that could be whatever happens. But then I'm just going to assume like Dig might come second out of their group. I know Gen G have had some slow Fridays, so it'd be interesting to see some of these tiebreaker teams actually meet in round 1 or even the quarterfinals, if that's a possibility.
I think it's pretty. Yeah, I think it'll be Satthew. I back in SSG. Give us your top 5 though, Sath. I know that for the viewers playing at home, G2 clinches major with a 3rd or 4th. Yep. Guaranteed. Otherwise, they need a few other conditional things.
Yeah. Wait, so my top 5 as in of the regional? Or
both. I guess. It'll lead in.
I think same. It's the same, I guess. The same top 4, I'd say. As Rob said, and then or as Jazzo said, and then I think the 5th is SSG. I think they're the best performing quarters team. I'm sure they could actually even beat one of the semifinalists I have now and become a semifinalist themselves. but I think they I do see a world where they come up against Dig and that 9th through 12th match beat them, and then that's enough for them. Because I mean, or M80 could also make it to quarters, but I just
M80
feel
has to play either Complexity, Energy, or V1 if they don't get first.
And M80's beaten
You got this
two
thing
of those.
mapped out, Rob. Damn.
M80's beaten
I'll
Energy
baby.
before.
You know me.
So
Yeah.
there's no there's no upset. You've got the top 4 making top 4. Surely what we've seen in NA, we've seen Dig get a top 4. Surely, Reddles is going for it. He's got Optic, Shopify, and Axel 345. Like, can we see something around there, Satthew? Can we?
That's your job.
Who's the most likely to
Give us-
be the upset then? I want to ask Sath. Who's the most likely? If there's going to be a upset team, top 4, who is it?
As in, in this regional or making
This
land
regional.
somehow?
This
This regional. I mean, Furia.
That's cool.
I feel like that's technically considered an upset at this point, and I think it's Furia. I think they're a team that could just. I mean, they could get top 4. They have the talent for it. I think they also have the game plan for it. I think there's some translation issues right now, in terms of gameplay, obviously, and I think they could. I think they could pick it up on a random weekend like this one. So,
do we see with the current situation? Obviously, Gen G already made it. FaZe, I don't know if they're locked, but they've basically already made it. And also we've got
FaZe have less points
Complexity.
than Complexity.
Well, I was just saying the top 3. Like G2, you guys are like close, but it's still you guys still need to perform.
Behind FaZe. So
FaZe only has one more point than G2.
Oh, okay.
We're
But is that
scenarios.
big though? Is it a big point? Is it a potential avoided tiebreaker? Oh, not really.
Not really. I
I think they're guaranteed tiebreaker.
1 point is enough
let's
to
be
break
real.
lose a tiebreaker.
They're guaranteed a tiebreak. Look,
One.
what I was trying to say is, do you think that potentially some of these top 2, top 3 teams, whatever, perhaps underperform this regional, don't take it as seriously, or do you think they're going to perform better with no pressure or less pressure?
I don't even think from a pressure standpoint. I think they'll just perform well because everyone's consistently been performing well. Yeah, I think those top 3 definitely. I see them all doing well, and we're number 4 right now, and I see us doing well. But just from their sake and their side of things, I'd see them topping their groups definitely.
And, but perhaps on the other side of things, a team that they know they can't make the major but want to play upset, i.e. Reddles, i.e. Optic, could you see them performing?
Oh, yeah, easily. I think it's like that fabricated flow state we were talking about. Now they're just like, let's just play. Then no one's going to question each other's touches. Let's just go for the ball. Let's play our game.
Masterclass against M80 coming up.
Oh, yeah.
If only Reddles was here for that conversation. He'd be taking notes.
M80.
Oh, he's here.
He's
here now, but he wasn't here earlier when we were talking about it. When I mentioned you could literally see that version of Optic this weekend.
Oh yeah. No, you could.
CJ, stop avoiding. Give us your top 5, CJ.
Dude, I could see M80 doing well too, though. Just to throw that in there because they're gross.
Same. Like I was saying to Jimmah as well, this happens in OCE where you just get the teams that can't make the major. They just play upset. They just play with no fear. I hate it. I think we're going to see it this weekend. But are we going to see an upset top 4? I know I was pushing Satthew down that train, but I don't know if I can see it either. I think Gen G have to be top 4, so we'll put them in there. I love the complexity of finally consistent, whether that's top 4s or seconds. It's good to see them not losing in 9 to 12 randomly or getting bad matchups. So I think they'll make top 4 again because they're just on a roll. They're in flow state complexity, I think. FaZe are interesting. They're back, but are they back? They're probably back.
I think they're back.
I think
historically, FaZe only has
I don't want to be boring into the same top 4 because I think G2 are just going to do it. You guys are too much of a well-oiled machine. So I think it is the same.
That, but our group is tough. That's the thing.
It
is definitely
matchups.
The group to prevent us from doing so. Like this is the one where it can throw us off our game because we played 3 great teams back to back to back.
And you could go straight into complexity or like in a quarters. I mean, like a
in
group
quarters.
first place. You could go into complexity or a FaZe in the quarters.
Yep.
If you don't win your group.
Yes.
They don't win their
Yes, that's correct.
All right,
But-
let me go. Let me take it the other way then. Now I'm thinking about it. I'm
Okay.
going to say that G2... Oh, it's hard to say they don't top the group. I think Furia could probably just top this group with the least not expectations. They can still technically make the major if they win, can't they? They're not that far
Yeah.
behind.
You did say
They're
they would make the
16.
finals of
No,
complexity
they can.
last
They,
regional
they
though.
definitely can.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
say that. I went for the Sam double up and it didn't exactly work.
You might have to do the opposite to get the reverse psychology. You know?
Well, I'm not saying that I want Furia to make it over you, though, Chrome. I want you guys
That's
to make
basically
it.
what you're telling me.
No,
though.
I'm not telling
said
you
you want
that.
them in
I'm
the
saying
finals.
that I'm trying to get a scenario where I don't get the top 4 in the top 4, and I think the scenario is G2 don't win their group, either you or Furia beat them, and then they lose to a phase or a complexity in the quarters. So I'm going to put G2 in 5th, because I think they're still going to make the major, but it's not going to be the top 4. They're going to be the best performing 5th team. They're going to lose to a phase or complexity, which means that I'm going to put my
They're pretty much going to
faith...
make major 5th or 8th either way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, they're making the major. Yeah,
We'll take that.
I'm just
We're
being
happy.
exciting and putting them 5th instead of 4th. And in 4th, I think I'm gonna have to put Space Station because
I'll take it. Shit.
I like
go.
seeing the
go,
bounce
Rob.
back. I've said it all week. When people ask me about NA, when people ask me about Space Station, seeing you guys reverse sweep NRG is fantastic to see. The mental's back.
Huge.
Whether it's
Isn't it crazy? Our series against G2 went 7 games. G2 scored 7 goals first against us.
exactly
single
this
game.
is what I'm
Isn't that
saying.
crazy?
I've not seen a Space Station gaming that
depressing.
hasn't thrown in the towel for a while, so it's exciting to see. I think
Wait,
you
what is it
guys
that you were
might be
saying?
back. What's that?
Rob,
I'm saying G2 in every single game. We played 7
Scored
games
first?
against G2. G2 scored first.
And
all
then the
7
next
games.
series, we conceded first against FaZe every game.
no.
It's
I hate
funny.
Rocket League.
So I think
Rocket
there's going to be
League's
some teams, like I
incredible.
think Optic can make a quarters. Like there's going to be teams around there trying to make upsets, but I think we'll see the 5 major teams be top 5, if you will, or at least top 4 in a quarters, with Space Station in the semis instead of G2. So my final, it's probably just going to be Gen G. It's probably Gen G phase again. Seems like Gen G have complexities number and phase. Well, phase are back. I'll believe. But the same top 5. No crazy upsets from anyone so far. Jimmah?
I'm pretty, I guess, conservative on that as well. Like, I mean, you look at the points, right? And clearly you got Gen G complexity well ahead of the bell curve, and then close followed is FaZe and G2. And then from Dig to NRG, you've got 6 teams there. And
one
it's a
placement.
4-point different. Yeah, it is. That is so competitive. Now, you've touched something really cool, is that those teams, I think, sitting below, I don't know, NA, I don't know how competitive it really is. For all we know, Optic could come out absolutely swinging
V1?
and ruin someone's day. Yeah, V1 could come out absolutely. Axel could just come out swinging. I don't know, and then you got teams like, I'm actually impressed that like Matey are doing so well. Like they've had some pretty tough lineups and they've been pretty resilient, right? But now's the time to sort of test that grit. And for all like I don't want to jinx anything, but like could G2 have a really bad come out into like the round 1 or something like that, right? And then all of a sudden it's like, will we have forced tiebreakers? But I guess for me, I think those top 4 teams are sort of secure. And like, I don't know how far the depth goes. Like, did Dignitas have just a really fortunate first event? A Space Station, were they just sort of slow and they're just going to pop off? A Furia and NRG, do they have all this untapped potential we're going to see just absolutely blow up? So I don't really know, but I'm sort of inclined to look at like a Space Station or Matey being the most competitive at the moment. I thought, these guys look pretty solid. Like, good on them. They're pretty resilient. I don't know much about where NRG. I know NRG's been the topic of discussion for a fair bit recently, so I don't know where they're going to be at. Like, for all we know, they might just come out absolutely swinging. But yeah, I'm quite inclined to put Space Station there at the moment, just from the grit we've seen. And then Matey's probably in close contention, but if Dig can hold it out, good on him.
I don't want to do it. I don't want to predict it, but I can honestly see like a Group A upset. Gen G, we've seen them fail in groups before. Well, not fail, but, come second or third. I can see a Dig topping that group, and all of a sudden we've got like a Gen G coming up against a Furia G2 space station in the 9 to 12. You know what I mean? Like, something crazy could just happen this regional. Because if they come second, they play Group C straight up, and then they go into like a phase in the quarters, which means we probably won't have our top 4 in the top 4. Like, this could easily be just Gen G just rocking up. Like, Nolly's had a few Tinder dates. Like, he's just kind of rolling into the regional, how good's life? They're not really warmed up. Their warm-up scrim was a little bit kind of, just going through the motions. Play, it might just be like Shopify first series, and Shopify just steamrolling like they're angry, they're ready to go, throwing caution to the wind and just stun them in the best of 5. And all of a sudden, the entire regional, whether you like it or not, whether it's for your advantage or disadvantage, could just be turned on its head. And all of a sudden, as I said, like a Space Station Furia G2 are forced to play a Gen G like first up. That'd be nuts.
I don't think Gen G drops any of the teams in Group A.
But you can see my situation though. Like, they could not be as switched on.
Look back to the team they lost in groups the first time. The only time they lost in groups.
Wasn't it?
It was Complexity. That's a top 4 team.
Good form line.
Look at the other 3 teams in Group A right now. It's a top 8 team, and then 2 teams.
Are we sleeping on Dig though? They're still 5th in points right now.
Okay, I don't think it's sleeping. Do you really think Dig are great? They're doing pretty good right now. But do you think they have the capability to upset Gen G?
Well,
From what you just said,
I
it seems
still
like
think
yes,
they can
but
make
I
the
don't think
major.
so.
I'm talking about him in predictions in general.
But you're trying to figure out a way to get Gen G not first in their group, right?
I am also doing that. Yes.
Out of the 3, Dig has a highest likelihood of beating Gen G, but I don't think it's high overall. Like, compared to the other 2 teams in that group, it's high, but compared to the rest of
if it was by scrims, it'd be Shopify. That team is. That's the most underperforming team, I think, this split.
I'm just mind-boggled that they went 0-3, like, I think twice or something like that.
Are they good against y'all in scrims too, Rob?
Oh man, they're demons.
Yeah, they're demons. That team's
funny as. I'm glad NA has these teams.
Scrim actors, Jimmah.
Oh, if they can translate, that team is like, they're fighting for a major, I think. Definitely.
Wow.
They just gotta figure out that team is so goes so under the radar, unfortunately, just because of how they've done in groups and everything. But that team is good.
Someone that has like a spreadsheet or has done the math, like, how low can you go in placements right now? Like, how low in seed can you go to still make a major? Like, can Shopify actually still make the major? Or is it only like V1?
Surely that'd be like
Koi can make a
teams
major.
losing.
Like,
I mean, Optic can technically
realistically
make the major. Like, technically.
Is it like a win?
But it'd be like the top teams coming last, all in their groups.
It's like,
it'd be crazy.
It's unrealistic, but it is mathematically possible for like Optic and Shopify to make it. I'm not sure about Accrue and Ghost and Axel, but at least 13 and up can. I know that.
Wow. So you're saying there's a chance? Look, I think they.
Well, I mean, we can just do the math. Like,
we have a graphic. Only 1 team is eliminated from major contention right now, and that's Accrue. That in the regional.
Wow, they're still in it, even if they come second, Optic or Shopify.
So Axel and Ghost have to win.
Yeah.
And anything above that, just have to at least get like top in grand final, and then probably some other help. Looks like.
All right, let's be realistic. It ain't happening.
Sure.
Yeah, we're getting crazy.
Right.
Like,
Jazo, what's your top 5 then, Rob?
You're just asking everyone to break their thumbs and not play on the day for those teams to win.
I'm trying to say Gen G could like randomly drop a best of 5 series, and you're like, don't be crazy, and now you're trying to pitch Optic making the major with 9 points right now. Like,
no, I wouldn't say it was going to happen. It could, like possibly, like, mathematically, not
Yeah,
actual,
it could.
not in actuality,
Did you give you 5, Jimmah? Anyway,
Yeah.
give me 5. What was it?
I think it's just
It was the same.
Yeah, look. Yeah, it's pretty much so. Whatever the top 4 that exists now are it.
Yep.
And then to me, it's in. I'm nudging. I just love the performance of Matey and Space Station right now, so I do think it's out of those 2. Obviously, Space Station had the grit lately, so I'm going to nudge them ahead. But like I said, I'll be very interested to know how I actually have no idea how Knights even really play at the moment, but watching Furia and NRG, like I wonder if they do have that, like just can they actually win a regional? And from what I'm hearing across the grapevine, people are like, oh yeah, no, if they get their act together, they can potentially like do really well. So who knows? But yeah, for me, it's between Space Station and Matey at the moment. And I don't know, is it possible, Rob, that you can meet them in round 1 or something like that? Or
No.
I'm trying. No, I'm just trying to. Yeah, so no. So who knows? They'll be quite interesting.
Righto, Rob.
Same top 4. I think we either get a top 8 and just outright make it, or we get a tiebreaker and win that. Because I could definitely see
Matey.
It's hard to predict our group, like who's gonna get first seed, because I feel like SNG2, either of us can beat each other, and Fury could just show up at randomly. But it's hard for me to see Fury beating Dignitas in that round 12 because they seem to just tilt off the face of the earth. What I saw, in at least in replays. So I can see Dig beating them, but most likely I see Dig losing that round 12, and then I could definitely see M80 lose to like a V1 or an Energy in that round 12 as well. And we just outright make it.
Which would put you guys up big.
Yeah.
If you guys get like second or better in your group, that'd be really big. I like it.
Well, we all are pretty boring. I try to make it exciting, but I couldn't even do it myself. When you really break it down, I think we're probably going to see the top 4. But as I said, there's certainly this format plays to upsets, as Mr. Jimmah on our top left knows about. If you just get the wrong matchup at the wrong time, it can absolutely kill your major contention. So
yeah, like Herbo, Genji getting second seed or third seed.
Yeah, there's certainly, or even a phase.
Yeah.
Like there's so many. Yeah. If a team just doesn't rock up on the Friday, and best of 5s are nothing as well. I feel like all of a sudden you can be 0-2 and be like, whoa, what's going on here?
When are we getting best of 7s in groups?
Oh, you format Frank's back cool. Again. You just love it. Look, no, I think
I love it.
I love best of 7s.
You're the one that mentioned it. You're like, oh, it's best of 5s. You're like nothing. You mentioned it. You brought it up.
I love best of 7s. I know. I did say it. I do love best of 7s. I like the World's Wildcard being best of 7. I know a lot of people didn't, because sometimes you're getting like the SSA matchups and stuff where it's like, why are we playing an extra game? But best of 5 feels so fast now. I don't know. You want to differentiate between the finals and not the finals, though. Like, do you want to do a best of 9? I think best of 7's enough, but is it enough in the early stage?
Set, man. Where's my best of set online?
I feel like I was the only one that didn't have a problem with best 7 for Worlds all the way through.
I liked it.
I think if anything, having all the quarterfinals, semis, and finals on one day was pretty rough, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Do you guys want to say who wins OC regional, even though it doesn't really matter?
Power.
Ooh.
They win it.
Yeah.
Power. Me too.
Yeah. We really show up when nothing's on the line. So let's just do it.
But that's
what's
the thing.
mindset?
Isn't everything on the line for you guys? Like literally everything? Don't you have to win?
No, like I like, because basically, like if KCP make it out of their groups, I think they've clinched it.
Yeah,
no
they have
matter
to come
what.
last.
Yeah. So yeah, and there's no way that. I mean, it looked terrifying for like the last regional. I think GZ didn't look too crash hot coming out of their groups. Neither did KCP. But like, I think the dust has settled, and I think things are well seeded now. Like, because in regional 1, we actually had a group of death. And then that's sort of, it's a bit muddy, but now the dust has settled, and I think things are quite well seeded, and because of that, there's no way that KCP aren't making it out of their group. So it's like, yeah, if they lose, I mean, like that's it. I'm gonna have a spring in my step. But yeah, no, I mean, who knows? Like if we pop off when things aren't on the line, they'll be very, very interesting.
What's the mindset then for you guys? You guys like, let's prove a point this regional, or is it going to be see Pioneers win a game and sort of back your mind a little bit demotivated, or is it just like grab as many points as you can?
What about
Worlds?
Worlds?
I think, yeah, that's exactly it. So Worlds is, because we've performed so poorly twice in a row, and GZ have won 2 times, they've nearly closed the gap. Like they're in contention to make Worlds now. If
that's crazy after missing a whole split.
It is.
Plus,
It is, and that's why it's quite exciting that that splits. You accumulate more points as the season goes through. It gives that sort of that recency, like, oh, anything can kind of happen, right? You can't really get a leg up, and it's for that reason that, hey, a top team that even did all right by OCE standards at a LAN, they've now fallen off of this next split. A new team has come up who have dominated now, and now all of a sudden the points are pretty close. So we recognize that hey, even though the split is seemingly done, like, yeah, there might be a 1% chance that we make it, but it's like, hey, we still got worlds on the line, and plus, like, we want to send a message, to OCE, right? Like, because I thought that even though that KCP and GZ, like, I think they've nailed it, right? Like, they did a roster change, Super Locky taken off the roster. There's a little bit of, I'd say, like, friendly heat between the teams, right?
Definitely.
So they're motivated to get the leg up. I look at them just like, oh, wow, this guy put 130 hours in the last fortnight. Like, all right, like, that's like more than most teams combined, right? In some cases. So you see they got the grind factor. Looking at like how they're playing, they're just like, OCs are sort of really picked up, right? And we're just sort of, like, oh my goodness, like, you kind of blink and miss it. But that being said, we have performed somewhat well in scrims. Like, we felt like we had the upper hand. And so it's almost like, yeah, world's on the line, but it's also like it'd mean a lot to us as a team to be like, hey, we're not out of it. Like, we can still hang in there. Like, we can keep up with teams in that honeymoon period. Like, they're just in the zone. Like, you watch them, right? Like, they are in that flow state. You can tell by like the way, like, some guys like pre-jumped and taken the touch off their teammate. They're probably like, like, no, you take it, mate. Like, don't worry. We're like, oh, let's not double commit. Like, it's your turn on the ball. I don't know.
It's so
I mean?
true.
It's probably similar to Nip's situation and Sam.
Yeah.
They were eliminated, but they still won that third regional. I'm sure they're feeling. I mean, Astramic put that big twit longer out. He's feeling confident. He said, "We're gonna fix it next split." You see the work they've already put in.
Oh, totally. And it's really funny because we're already having that kind of conversation. Like, all right, like let's really regain and rebuild. Like, what is it that we have to work on? And it's like, hold on, we still got a regional left, and the points actually really matter now. So it's kind of like this funny spot we're in. So look, if we lose again to either KCP or GZ, I'm going to be like, yeah, it's going to cut, but it's also kind of cool to see, because that's like the nail in the coffin. Like, if you lose 3 times in a row when you're meant to be the top team, that's just evidence that, hey, you're not the top team. Like, new competition has come in and shaped it, which is always exciting. Sure, in the short term, like, I'm like, oh, I hope I have a job in esports next regional. You know what I mean? Like, you always have that little bit of anxiety, but at the same time, it's like, this is exciting that OCE's starting to evolve.
Yeah,
absolute facts.
So power's running 100%.
Yeah, that
I'm
I feel like you
here.
guys did that last season, right? Where you guys won and where it didn't matter. It was like spring split or something, or was it winter split?
That was, I think it was this. Yeah,
it was
winter split. Yeah, no, I think you nailed it. Well done. Yeah, it was literally that. It's like, oh yeah, we popped off when it didn't matter, and it was a similar kind of thing. We got eliminated a couple of times in like the quarters, right? We're like, oh great, awesome. And it was to KCP as well. Like, they just have that edge against us. If they meet us lower in the bracket, they win. If we meet them in the grand finals, we win. So is what it is.
The regain regional number 3. Look, you've convinced me, so I'll be on the desk all weekend casting. So I might predict power now. Look, I think that wraps up. We banged on the 2-hour mark, boys. This was an absolute pleasure. This has to be our most insightful episode yet. If you were listening the whole time, I feel like your brain has expanded, because mine has. Thank you so much, Jimmah and Satthew, for coming on. It was awesome.
Yeah, had a great time. Thanks for having.
I love it. I want to get the coaches on, and this just proves to me that we need to do this sort of thing more often. So we'll absolutely be having these two back on.
What are you talking about, CJ? Coaches don't do anything.
Yeah, I think we've realised. I hope if you listen to the show that you guys realise the amount of people management and other things that goes on to coaches. It has to be incredibly stressful. And people ask me if I would like to coach, and I said, well, I'd just rather play. I'd rather be a cog in the wheel than trying to control the entire wheel, if you will, or the machine. It's insane. So Anyway, thanks everyone for tuning in. Absolute legends. I'm going to chuck a raid over to Amphis because I just saw he's streaming for the regional. What an absolute weapon. He's warming up right now. So we'll chuck a raid in. Everyone jump in there. Thanks, everyone. This was the CJ Show number 11. Chrome Jarzo, final thoughts?
It was fun, boys. Excited for tomorrow. Glad for Satthew and Jimmah to join us. Good luck to those guys as well. And let's get it on with this final regional before LAN. Let's do it.
Yeah. May the best teams win.
I love hearing from the current age coaches. So thanks for coming on, boys.
Awesome. Now, cheers for having us on. This has been a lot of fun. I forgot we're actually even streaming, so cheers for that one.
It's just exactly. I love that. We're just hanging out. We're just dissecting each other's brains. It's absolutely incredible. But best of luck to everyone this weekend. Hopefully we can get a win in OCE and a win in maybe a top 2 in NA. That'd be nice. Lock in the major. We'll get the CJ Show buff, and we'll we won't see Jimmah in San Diego, but maybe next split we can get all the game together. But we might. No one. Yeah, exactly. But we need to believe. We need to believe. All right, guys. That's it, though. Thanks, everyone, hanging. And we'll raid Amphis. See you guys later. Peace.
Later.